The long-standing rivalry between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart is one that will be remembered for ages. Their mutual disdain was palpable, both in the ring and behind the scenes. Each athlete was fiercely competitive, with neither willing to accept being second best. They both aspired to be at the top. Bret, in particular, was more emotionally vulnerable than Shawn, which contributed to the tension between them. This animosity is arguably one of the most discussed rivalries in wrestling history. Working during this time was filled with unpredictability, as it felt like a volatile situation. Initially, their conflict seemed staged, but it quickly escalated into something very real. Shawn often played the heel, and it wasn't always enjoyable for him. Bret even expressed feelings of intense anger towards Shawn. This rivalry stands out as one of the most intense and iconic in professional wrestling.
It's been a rivalry that has been talked about as much as this issue between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels.
Both men were on a path destined for confrontation during a period when larger athletes in WWE were beginning to make space for smaller wrestlers. The wrestling world had previously been dominated by giants, and when I shared my aspirations of becoming a WWE superstar, I was often met with skepticism because I didn't fit the typical mold of being 6'8" or weighing 300 pounds. Alrighty, however, this only fueled my passion, as it showed me that there was a possibility for someone like me to succeed, especially since I found myself more drawn to the matches featuring these smaller competitors rather than the larger ones. In the early 90s, there was a noticeable shift towards more athletic and technically skilled characters, allowing wrestlers who could deliver impressive performances to shine.
I want you to take a good look at the wrestler of the 90s.
It was an opening for many talents as some of the prominent figures from WWE's earlier days began to depart. While people may debate the impact of Hogan and the talent over at WCW, there truly is no comparison when looking at what Shawn and Bret brought to the table. Some wrestlers just have that unique chemistry in the ring, and with Shawn and Bret, it felt effortless, like they could perform their routines with their eyes closed. They were both representatives of a new generation, playing crucial roles in shaping the future of the WWF during that era. Growing up in Calgary, Bret Hart embodied the image of a Canadian hero, famously declaring himself the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
He's the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. He's my hero, and I think he's everybody else's hero too.
Shawn Michaels had his share of admirers as well. Many fans were captivated by his charisma. He truly lived up to his moniker as the Heartbreak Kid. Bret and Shawn epitomized what WWE aimed to represent. When it comes to who was the superior wrestler, many would argue that Bret had the edge. Known as the excellence of execution, Bret possessed exceptional skill and fluidity in his movements.
I'm going to be carrying the flag for the new generation.
Situation into an engaging and believable match. His technical prowess was unmatched. Whether it was grappling or brawling, he excelled in every aspect inside the ring. At that time, Bret was undoubtedly in his prime. Shawn, on the other hand, was also an incredibly gifted athlete. It's hard to find anyone who had a poor match with him. In my view, Shawn Michaels stands out as an exceptional performer. With the emergence of the term sports entertainer, Shawn truly embodied what it meant to be one. His charisma, flamboyance, and unparalleled talent made him a standout figure in the industry.
You will not ever see a man more charismatic, more flamboyant, or more talented than the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
I firmly believe that he is the most gifted in-ring performer of all time, and he was well aware of his own prowess. First entered the wrestling world, Shawn had a reputation for being somewhat of a spoiled brat. It was very much Shawn's world, and everyone else was just part of the scenery. This dynamic created initial professional friction between them.
Shawn Michaels, I think you're one of the greatest wrestlers I've ever had the privilege of watching.
At one point, Shawn and Bret Hart were quite close. It's essential to recognize that Bret considered Shawn a dear friend. He welcomed Shawn into his home and even invited him to spend time with his children. The text. I recall an event in Calgary where Shawn, Razor Ramon, and Diesel were at Bret's house, engaging in playful antics like shooting each other with milk from super soakers for hours before heading to the Saddle Dome for a show. They genuinely enjoyed each other's company, and Bret often spoke highly of Shawn's talent in the ring, despite occasionally criticizing his attitude.
Huh? It's the truth, Bert. Huh?
He had an attitude to me, and I think more like it was all about him and nobody else mattered.
Shawn could be unprofessional at times, and his demeanor often suggested he was the center of attention. Disregarding others, he was undeniably talented but lacked maturity early on. Despite being challenging to work with, his passion for wrestling was evident, and he was determined to achieve greatness. As WrestleMania approached, Shawn had his sights set on facing the WWF champion Bret Hart. For Shawn, winning that title was everything. It symbolized success in the wrestling world. Next, the journey of this young boy from San Antonio, Texas was about to culminate in a significant moment. Leading up to WrestleMania, their previous rivalries took on a new dimension as they vied for the championship. The contrasting styles of Shawn and Bret complemented each other seamlessly, creating a compelling narrative that felt organic and straightforward. The 60-minute Iron Man match was a unique challenge. Few wrestlers would have accepted an hour-long match back then, but both Bret and Shawn were confident they could deliver. The idea had been presented to them almost as a challenge, and they embraced it wholeheartedly. The promotional vignettes were captivating, showcasing Shawn performing handstand push-ups, an impressive display that built anticipation. The stage was perfectly set for their clash. Shawn would rely on his speed and agility, while Bret would employ his hard-hitting technical submission style. Both men believed they were the best and were determined to prove it to the world. Neither wanted to settle for second place. They were both striving for the top spot.
This contest is the special Iron Man match for the World Wrestling Federation Championship.
This matchup is the highly anticipated Iron Man contest for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. When you think about the Iron Man format, few contests have been as perfectly suited for it as this one between these two competitors. Get ready, ladies and gentlemen, for an unforgettable display of non-stop action featuring perhaps the two greatest athletes to ever step into the ring. You come into this match with a clear allegiance. Either you're cheering for Bret Hart or you're rooting for Shawn Michaels, but there's a mutual respect for the other's talent. When discussing Bret and Shawn, it's essential to recognize their genuine desire to be the best. They are driven by the pursuit of excellence above all else. I remember being positioned near the top of the arena, and I couldn't help but wonder if this match might turn out to be dull. Earlier that day, while enjoying a WrestleMania breakfast at the hotel, I spotted Shawn eating, and he mentioned feeling really nervous. It struck me as remarkable that here was Shawn Michaels on the brink of headlining WrestleMania, admitting his nerves. Both competitors were undoubtedly excited, but a bit of that excitement often comes with nerves and anxiety.
Here we go, 60 minutes on.
It's that competitive spirit that fuels their drive. They thrive on overcoming challenges and achieving greatness despite the pressure. And then it began, 60 minutes on the clock. As the match unfolded, it was crucial for them to maintain the audience's attention. How could anyone possibly stay engaged for an entire hour of wrestling? What made this match so extraordinary was its pacing. The uncertainty of who would emerge victorious kept everyone on the edge of their seats.
20 minutes into this matchup, ladies and gentlemen, and surprisingly, there has not been a decision. Well, these guys are pitching a shutout, McMahon.
Just 4 minutes in, surprisingly, neither competitor had gained an advantage. Both were holding their ground, McMahon. These two masterfully crafted a story throughout the full 60 minutes. I've witnessed countless matches, but only a handful truly stand out. The determination displayed by both competitors was remarkable, with neither wanting to be the one to falter. It was an incredible experience to be part of such a historic moment. We reached the end of 60 minutes without a clear victor, an unprecedented draw. I was left wondering what comes next.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. This match has been ordered to continue under sudden death rules.
In many respects, I could argue that they endured the entire 60-minute Iron Man match and that overtime should never have been necessary. It was a clever twist in the narrative.
He got it! He got all of it! Michaels got all of it! Michaels in the cover! 1, 2,
match is etched in my memory. It's unforgettable. Shawn had it. So many fans have told me that this was the match that inspired them to pursue wrestling. Looking back, I take immense pride in it. It felt monumental. I honestly believe that Shawn could not have achieved such greatness with anyone else. Despite their differences later on, there was no one else Shawn would have preferred to share that moment with, especially at that point in his career. I recall seeing Shawn descend from the ceiling that night and witnessing that extraordinary Iron Man match, and afterward I thought to myself, I don't know if I belong here. It was that exceptional, a true masterpiece, one of the finest matches ever, something magical together. However, Shawn's immaturity and temper surfaced at a crucial moment. When Shawn was awarded the WWF title right in front of Bret "Hitman" Hart, you could see him on camera telling Bret to get out of the ring. He was shouting at the referee and directing Bret to leave. Bret must have felt disrespected after giving everything he had for an hour, only to be treated like that on his way out. I definitely sensed some tension, and by the end of that match, it nearly boiled over. Honestly, it's somewhat of a blur now, but I remember Earl trying to put the belt on Shawn while he snapped at him, fumbling around in a way that made it clear things weren't going as planned. We often refer to those moments as a bit chaotic. Bret walked back to the locker room visibly upset. That image is iconic in my mind. At first, I thought it was all part of the performance, not realizing it had deeper implications. Later, I learned about the real feelings involved. Bret skipped the WrestleMania after party while Shawn was present.
Get out! Get out! Get out!
WrestleMania 12, you had a babyface telling his opponent to get out of the ring. The entire narrative was charged with backstage tension. Shawn and Bret tried to bury the hatchet a few times when things became too intense. They both wanted to bring out their best performances for each other. They were aware when things were getting out of hand and would attempt to rein themselves in, yet every time they tried to do that, something would inevitably happen.
The World Wrestling Federation needs a hero. They need a role model. They need somebody they can look up to, not somebody that poses for girly magazines.
In my view, you have two paths to choose from. Either retreat into yourself and give up, or come out swinging with all you've got. There are times when personal tensions translate well on screen, and I believe this dynamic added to the intrigue of their rivalry.
By the way, how'd you know I was in that girly magazine? You couldn't help yourself, could you? You had to flip through the pages just a little bit.
When Shawn gets a grip on you, comfortable with.
Shawn Michaels, I will kick your ass.
It wasn't about the antics like pointing at someone's groin or pulling down their pants. This rivalry took on a life of its own. It became intensely personal. It was thrilling to watch.
You're a disgrace to wrestling. You're nothing but a degenerate.
What we witnessed was genuine drama unfolding on television, setting it apart from everything else happening in the show. Coming from Tennessee, we had a saying in our office, personal issues draw money. This was one of the first instances where they attempted to present the product as more reality-based.
You're nothing but a punk.
Emphasizing that real emotions lie behind the characters, and those emotions can sometimes be hurt. Bret was far more vulnerable compared to Shawn, who had a way with words that unsettled Bret.
Let's start with the role model stuff because, hey man, I seen you on the road, and bro, you ain't no role model.
I think this was the beginning of their ongoing conflict. Shawn would say anything on air without any hesitation. The pivotal moment came when Shawn delivered a promo on Raw, insinuating that Bret had a romantic involvement with Sunny. He basically claimed that Bret had been unfaithful, suggesting that these so-called sunny days had occurred.
Even though lately you've had some sunny days, my friend, you still can't get the job done.
The truth is, they never happened. Shawn crossed a line that should never be crossed. Those kinds of statements could jeopardize Bret's marriage. The next day, when Bret returned home, his son Dallas asked him about his relationship with Sunny, which only fueled Bret's anger. It was a complete breach of the unwritten rules. At that point in Shawn's life, he was single and carefree, often telling everyone, "You're bringing a spoon to a gunfight." He felt he had nothing to lose, and who could forget those two words? Sunny days. Shawn had no stakes in this. He was single. It was clear that these two were on a collision course for confrontation. We knew it likely wouldn't happen in the ring because they were both professionals, but we all anticipated it might go down backstage. When Bret flew in for the TV tapings in Hartford, he was determined to confront Shawn. He was genuinely furious when he saw him. He walked right up and shoved him against the wall. Then, out of nowhere, things escalated into an all-out brawl in the locker room, one of the most chaotic scenes I've ever witnessed in my years in this business. These two men had reached their breaking point and were done being professional. They genuinely despised each other. Working with someone you don't trust is incredibly difficult, and it must have been tough for everyone else in the locker room as the tension between these two stars constantly simmered. It certainly made the work environment unpredictable, like walking on eggshells, and now Bret Hart is once again the WWF champion. Bret was feeling quite discontent during this period, especially as his contract was nearing its expiration. At the same time, WCW, our rival promotion, was presenting him with guaranteed contracts. He received their offer, which came through on his fax machine, and it was right there in front of him. He realized he would have to sign it, so he reached out to Vince. The narrative surrounding Bret's departure from WWE is quite intricate, as there was a bidding war happening between WCW and WWE. Next, Bret was exploring the possibility of a better opportunity down south at WCW during the peak of the Monday Night Wars. Many wrestlers had made the switch, but none had the same level of prominence as Bret the Hitman Hart, who was still the champion at the time. It was difficult for me to envision WWE without Bret. I assumed everything would be resolved eventually. He was being offered an unprecedented contract, reportedly around $2.6 million annually. I recall Vince strongly suggesting that Bret should consider taking the WCW contract. At that point, it was clear to Vince that Bret was likely heading there, but Bret was still the WWE champion. It created a complicated situation that needed careful handling. I learned that Bret was set to face Shawn at Survivor Series in Montreal. Before their match, Bret approached Shawn and expressed that he had no objections to the finish, stating he would be fine with Shawn winning if that was the plan. He emphasized his professionalism and commitment to the company. Shawn responded by saying he appreciated Bret's stance, but added that he wouldn't extend the same courtesy to Bret. This was a tricky situation, and while I can't recall every detail, Shawn never shied away from admitting his own lack of professionalism during that time. When Bret conveyed to Vince his concerns about dropping the title to someone who wouldn't reciprocate his professionalism, he made it clear that it wasn't just about Shawn, it was about respect for the company he had helped build. The locker room buzzed with speculation about what would happen if Bret decided to jump to WCW while still holding the championship. It was imperative that Bret didn't leave with the title. He needed to lose it to someone in WWE. There was no way we could allow him to take the championship with him. Bret insisted he wouldn't take the title to WCW, asserting his integrity. I believe him. However, Eric Bischoff had already set a precedent when Medusa famously discarded the Women's Championship on live television. Losing Bret as one of our top champions was not something we could afford, especially not with the title going with him. Throughout that week, there were ongoing discussions about how to handle the situation with Bret. A documentary crew even recorded conversations leading up to it.
I have to beat Shawn. We can have a schmoz or whatever you want.
I would think it'd be a run-in type thing. I'm open to anything.
Scenario where there could be a run-in, as a title doesn't change hands on disqualification, it requires a pinfall or submission. There were various creative ways we could have approached it, but ultimately, it wasn't up to Bret to decide how things unfolded. He was unwilling to ensure that Shawn left as champion that night. Just before the pay-per-view, Triple H had a phone conversation with Vince about ensuring the belt remained in WWE, discussing strategies to make that happen.
Welcome everyone to the 11th annual Survivor Series.
Meanwhile, Shawn was willing to do whatever was necessary. Shawn seemed eager to avoid conflict with Bret. They spent a significant amount of time talking in the locker room about how their relationship had deteriorated over the years. Once upon a time, they had been friends who genuinely respected each other, which made the situation all the more painful.
This is what it's all about. How many times have we heard Shawn Michaels say, I don't lay down for anybody?
Well, folks, this is very, very personal. This match is going to be stiff.
This was deeply personal for both of them. We've all heard Shawn say he wouldn't lay down for anyone, and this match was going to reflect those feelings. The Survivor Series match turned out to be an intense battle, filled with raw emotion from both competitors. It was a grueling contest between two individuals who held deep animosity for one another. As I watched in person from Montreal, I had no idea that Vince was the owner at that time.
It's just a down and dirty fight between two guys that hate each other's guts.
I was unaware of this before. I always thought Vince McMahon was just a commentator. Then during the match, he walks out in his suit, and I was completely taken aback. I kept wondering, what is happening? Why is Vince here? It was confusing to see him trying to get involved, urging the wrestlers to get back in the ring. He wanted Bret to notice his presence, making it clear that whatever unfolded was orchestrated by him.
Oh, you're kidding me. Are you going to tell me Bret Hart with a sharpshooter? Yes, he is.
Shawn locked Bret in the sharpshooter. I was on edge. Bret never submitted, yet suddenly the bell rang.
Wow, you talk about controversy.
That's when it hit me. They had pulled a fast one on Bret. Shawn was declared the winner, and they acted as if Bret had tapped out. Vince was simply doing what he believed was best for business. Out of nowhere, Bret locked eyes with Vince, and I thought, did he really just spit in Vince McMahon's? Respecting Vince, showing he didn't care about the consequences. What Vince did to Bret was a massive betrayal, and it all felt like a blur to me. I was at the gorilla position, the last stop before entering the ring, when Baby Boy looked around and said something to the effect of, "What are they doing?" I was alone in Vince's office, glued to the monitor as everything unfolded. I couldn't believe it. This was about to explode. We were just as shocked as everyone in the arena, completely unaware of what had just transpired. The crowd could sense Bret's anger, which is why this incident became known as the Montreal Screwjob. This moment transformed wrestling for an entire generation and beyond. The match had been going well, but then confusion set in. Wait, his reaction was intense. You could feel his fury. After he spat and everything else went down, he pointed to the WCW logo on the screen. Despite the rivalry between Bret and Shawn, on that night, Shawn played the villain role, and things would never be the same for him after that. Bret confronted Shawn, saying something along the lines of,
Shawn, you were in on that? My hands are clean of this one, I swear to God.
Vince had told Shawn that he would deny everything, so Shawn was caught in a tough spot. It wasn't easy for him. So there was Bret on one side of the room and Vince on the other, with Shawn in between. I remember sitting next to Shawn while Vince and Bret exchanged words. At one point, Shawn tried to interject, and I had to grab his leg and tell him to stay quiet. Vince explained his side, saying to Bret, "What did you expect me to do?" I did it for my company and for everyone in this locker room. I would do it again. Vince and Bret approached each other like two wrestlers gearing up for a showdown.
Two wrestlers. I walked towards him, he came right towards me, so it wasn't just me going and attacking a man. Like it was a accepted fight. I hit Vince with a right hand punch, like it was a knockout punch.
Reflecting on it now, it stirs up very real emotions, feelings of disgust and injustice. It just didn't seem fair. The incident also cast Shawn Michaels in a shadow he's struggled to escape ever since. While Shawn is genuinely a good person, for those who supported Bret, he became somewhat of a villain. This wasn't something that would simply fade away. It deeply affected Bret. Bret became fixated on it, even during his time in WCW. I remember being at a WCW event in the same city as Bret. Next, he chose to stay in my room to avoid running into Shawn, fearing what might happen if they crossed paths. He genuinely believed there was a possibility he could harm Shawn if they met. Both men experienced dark times in their personal lives and careers after the incident. Shawn suffered a severe back injury during a Royal Rumble match that forced him to step away from wrestling for a while. Similarly, Bret faced a career-ending injury in the ring. Both were at the peak of their careers, but found themselves sidelined just a few years after Montreal, grappling with their respective struggles. Next, Shawn managed to make a comeback and reinvent himself behind the scenes. I noticed a renewed energy in him. He seemed lighter on his feet. Anyone familiar with Bret from those days would agree that he carried anger for a long time. I often compared it to lugging around a heavy bag of rocks. Since the Montreal Screwjob, Bret and Shawn avoided each other completely, not speaking for over a decade. There were moments when Shawn expressed a desire to move past their issues. It was through TJ that things began to change. Being close to the Hart family, TJ told Shawn that Bret might be open to talking. This made Shawn emotional. He even mentioned wanting to fly to Calgary and knock on Bret's door. He said if Bret wanted to punch him first, that was fine as long as they could talk afterward. TJ relayed this to Bret, which meant a lot to him. Bret seemed receptive, saying that at least Shawn felt remorseful. A surprising twist came when Bret asked TJ to give Shawn his number and see if he would reach out. I remember thinking that every few weeks Bret would mention that Shawn hadn't called. Deep down, I knew they needed to meet face to face. A phone call wouldn't suffice given their history. Shawn admitted he was too scared to call Bret, and as a result, nothing was resolved. I recall Bret expressing his wish to see Shawn in person and finally bury the hatchet. Since the Montreal Screwjob, I don't think they ever saw or spoke to each other again until one particular night. When Bret spotted Shawn in catering, it was clear something significant was happening. Emotions surged as they both expressed how long they had wanted to talk. But Bret quickly suggested they do it in the ring. Man wasn't wasting any time. I felt happy seeing Shawn and Bret come together and share the ring again. It felt surreal. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. This was something you never thought would happen.
It's been 12 long years since anyone's seen Bret Hart.
I got 12 years of things that I wanted to get off my chest. And the very first thing I want to do is I want to call back there and ask Shawn Michaels to come out here.
You're not the only one that wants to bury the hatchet.
I offer my hand to you in friendship. If you want to bury the hatchet, let's bury it right now.
When Shawn hugged Bret, he apologized sincerely for everything that had transpired between them. The weight of what they had carried was finally lifted, and it was honestly one of the best moments I had ever witnessed. And witnessing that was truly one of the most remarkable experiences I've ever had. It highlighted the personal growth of both men as individuals. It was a powerful moment to witness, especially considering how two strong personalities can clash and lead to such chaos. You don't need to be best friends to put on incredible matches, generate significant revenue, or draw in crowds. It captivated me deeply, even though I didn't fully grasp the weight of the situation or how it escalated with the personalities involved. While it was tough for those directly affected, for us as viewers, we received an outstanding product because both competitors were at their best. Shawn and Bret are undoubtedly two of the greatest performers in the history of wrestling. Their encounters were nothing short of magical. The rivalry has endured through the years because it was authentic, it was genuine, and stemmed from two individuals who, despite their differences, shared a fierce competitive spirit. When considering long-lasting rivalries, Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart will always be remembered. Each man truly believed he was superior, and that conviction is what makes a rivalry memorable, even decades later. My fondest memories come from their matches. The chemistry between Bret and Shawn was unmistakable, leading to an extraordinary rivalry. It's unfortunate that things derailed between them, preventing them from fully exploring the stories they could have shared. They could have faced off annually for the next decade, creating monumental matches that would go down in history. It's a pity that such a golden opportunity slipped away from both of them.
Hey, man, good seeing you so much.